All right, well, welcome to our week 1 live chat for Introduction to Psychology. I'm so excited that you guys are here, and then welcome to anyone who watches the recorded archive version or copy of this chat. So I am Dr. Christine Spinks. Just a real quick about me, I'm your instructor for this course. I have a master's in counseling, I have a master's in forensic psychology, and I have a PhD in psychology. I have been teaching and working in the online academic environment since 2004. I've actually been with Kaiser since 2003. Kaiser was my very first university that I ever taught with, that I ever taught at a college level at. Before that, I had taught some middle and high school, but with Kaiser, I made the move to college, and I have loved it ever since. So I taught face-to-face for Kaiser at the Lakeland campus for 1 year, and then I switched to their online campus, and I've been online with them ever since. And it's a fantastic school, and I have loved working with them for many, many years now. So that's a little bit about me. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the classroom and classroom expectations. We're going to be talking some about plagiarism. What is it? How do we avoid it? I see it in every class that I teach, even my upper senior level courses, so I definitely want to make sure everyone has an understanding of how to avoid that. We're going to talk about the final project, and then a little bit of overview of what psychology is all about before you guys delve into it over the next 4 weeks. So tonight I probably am going to do a little more talking. It's going to be a little more one-sided than our other chats later on in the class, but I have a lot of information to cover. So I will stop at like the end of each section and ask for questions. So kind of listen to the section, and then if I don't answer your question, then I'm going to give you multiple chances to ask questions. So I know there are many students in this class that it's their first online class, so I hope that this is helpful, but I am always available to answer questions or walk you through any part of the classroom. So always, if it's I don't cover something tonight, then you can just let me know over the week. Okay, so in the classroom, one of the discussion forums is called, it's the Ask Questions section, and it is just what it says it is. It's a place for you to ask questions about the course. This is a great place to ask content-related questions about the due date of an assignment, clarity of directions, something about a resource or the reading assignments, because often if you have the question, chances are someone else in the class will be thinking the same thing, and when I answer you in that section, everyone gets to see that answer. And so it's a discussion forum, and there's a link in each of the weekly areas to that so that it's easy to get to no matter what week you're in. Now, I will respond to those within 24 hours. But I also know that there could be questions that you don't want to ask in front of the entire class, and you just want to ask me about specifics about an assignment, like something, an assignment you did. You want to ask follow-up questions, maybe about a grade, maybe you need an extension. All of those kind of things probably aren't appropriate for you to ask in the classroom in front of the class. All right, so there's a couple of options for asking those questions. So excuse me, the first one and the primary place is to drop me an email. When you email me from within the class, I'm going to hit reply, and whatever email is attached to the class, which is either your Kaiser email if you're enrolled from Kaiser, or your consortium email if you're enrolled through the consortium or consortium. And so make sure to look at those emails, whichever one you have, when I reply back to you. I reply to all emails within 24 hours and often quicker. And so the other option is to text or call me, but a lot of times in the afternoons and evenings, I'm not necessarily free to take a phone call unless we've set aside a time, just because I've got other commitments and I'm with family, friends, and stuff. But in those same situations, I can answer a text message. And so texting me is often the quickest way to get me. So when do you email versus when do you text me? So if you can wait until the next morning, because I check email, I'm usually in my email every day, well, Monday through Saturday in the mornings for sure. During the weekday, I'm in the email system until usually like 1, 2 o'clock. So if you email me in the morning, you're going to get a response that morning or early afternoon. But if it's later in the afternoon or the evening, if you can wait until the next morning for your answer, please email me instead of calling me during personal time or texting me. So if you can wait till the next morning, email is the best option. Now, like say you're working on an assignment and it's due that night. Well, then waiting till the next morning then may not be the best option. Or maybe the assignment's due in a couple days, but today is the day you're off from work that you need to get your assignments done. So that would be a situation where you might want to text me if you have a question, because you might want to finish if it's the questions related to the assignment you're working on, because you may need to finish it that day and not wait for me to get back to you by email. So like that would be the appropriate time to do that, but only up to like 9-ish at night. Like after that is really my private time, and I'm super flexible. Like if you needed an answer from me and it's like 10 o'clock at night to finish an assignment, just drop me an email with a question and just say, hey, it was too late to ask you. Can I have an extension on the assignment till I hear back from you on this question? And I'll answer your question the next morning by email, and that'll be fine. And there's no situation whatsoever where like it's so urgent to like contact me after 10 o'clock at night. Even if you're taking an exam at midnight or 1 in the morning and it cuts out on you and you can't get back in, I promise I won't let you fail. I'll reset it for you in the morning, drop me an email. But I have had students call me at like 1 in the morning because their computer shut down on them and they got kicked out of the exam. And it's never acceptable to call a boss or a professor or anything that you're related to professionally at like 1 in the morning. So please don't do that. Drop me an email. I'll work with you. I'll give you extra time for that exam so you can work it back into your schedule. I promise, a technical issue, I would never allow that to hurt your grade. So anyway, so that's kind of the different ways you can contact me. All right, so you have weekly discussions. You have one in every week, and so that's like kind of like having a classroom discussion, but by typing. So that's where you're going to post in a discussion forum. There's a discussion prompt each week. So if you look in the week 1 area and you go down to the week 1 discussion, it'll have directions for the discussion, the requirements, and then it will talk about what is this week's topic, which this week's topic has to do with youth, with bullying and youth suicide. And there's some specific questions to guide you in writing your initial response or your initial post to the discussion. So your primary post here, it says 200 words, but I think it's been changed to 300 words, so I will update that. Let me just make sure that I am right, that it is now supposed to be 300 and 200 words. It is. So I will update this PowerPoint. Also, every week I use these PowerPoints and I send them to everyone the next day. I post them in an announcement in the classroom and I send them to you by email. It will go either, again, to your Kaiser email or your consortium email, depending on what you're affiliated with. All right, so you do not have to write down any notes about what you're seeing on these slides because you can download them, the PowerPoints, and you can go back over them. All right, so I will update this slide, but it is 300 words for your primary post and 200 words for each response post. So you're going to answer the given discussion prompts or questions for the week in at least 300 words, and you're going to be bringing in information that you learned in your readings and research that week. All of your discussion posts can be answered either by the textbook or there might be an article linked to the discussion assignment, but for the discussions, you do not need to go find your own research. You're given everything you need if you're reading your book and reading any attachments in the directions. So you need to be bringing in information, right? Because every grade you receive in school, you're receiving a grade because your instructor is measuring your level of learning of the new information. You're being graded on what you've learned and your ability to communicate what you've learned. So you need to be bringing in what you've learned from the readings and applying it to whatever the topic is. And so you want to make sure that you cite and reference your information. And I'm going to talk about what that means in a little bit tonight. Okay, so 300 words. Then you need to respond to 2 of your peers' initial posts. This is like having a classroom discussion. So someone in the classroom, when you're face-to-face, says something really interesting and they expand on it, and then you're like, oh, I read this and it fits with that. So you're thinking, okay, then you raise your hand and you go next and you respond to what they said, and then people go back and forth, and that's how you build a classroom discussion. Well, we do the same thing online. So you're going to read their post, and if someone catches your attention and you have an idea and you want to build on what they said, you want to bring in some additional information, you want to further the discussion, then you'll reply to their post just as if you were replying to them in a face-to-face class. Okay, so each week you're going to write a primary post and 2 response posts for a total of 3 posts in each weekly discussion. And in that initial post, remember I said you needed to bring in information because you need to show that you've started to learn the information and that you know how to apply it. And because you don't want to plagiarize, you need to give credit to that source. So part of your grade for your discussions is that you're citing and referencing at least one source. You're bringing in at least some information to that discussion. And that doesn't mean you can't bring in personal examples or something that you already know, but your initial post can't be made up completely of information you already possess, because then there'd be no purpose for you to be here if you're not learning new information. So you can bring the two together. You guys have lived rich, you have rich life, all the students have rich lifetime experiences, and there's value in that. So like bring in the theory or the concept and explain what you've learned from the reading, and then you can use maybe an example or something you've seen as like maybe support for what you read that week in your textbook. So you can bring the two together. I don't want you to ever think that there's not value in your lived experiences, but that can't be the basis of your work in the school. You have to balance that. And also I post all of the weekly grades by Tuesday. So by next Tuesday, all your week 1 grades will be posted. I usually grade the discussion posts on Monday and then the written assignments on Tuesdays. So this is how your discussions are graded. Your initial post is worth 50 points. Each response post is worth 25 points. So obviously, if you're missing one entire of those posts, then you will have then you'll lose those points, obviously. But other way points can be lost is if you don't meet the word requirement, if you don't cite and reference in your initial post. That's worth 20 points. So make sure that you're bringing in information and giving credit to it. Also, any major spelling and grammar errors, not typos. I'm not super nitpicky, but it's really important though that it's like scholarly writing. I've seen students write an entire paragraph with no capital letters. They don't capitalize the first word in a sentence. They don't capitalize the standalone I's for like an entire paragraph. So that's not a typo. That's like a major grammatical issue throughout, and so points were lost. I've seen students write an entire paragraph and the only period was at the end of the paragraph, and they put like 15 commas throughout this paragraph, and it was like the longest run-on sentence I've ever seen. Again, that's not a typo, that's major grammatical errors. So, you know, if you spell something wrong here or there and you have an occasional grammatical typo, no big deal. Just work to the best of your ability to write in a good academic scholarly way. All right, and it says here, and in the rubric it says also that failure to put the word count at the end of each post, but I'm not going to take off points if you do that. That's kind of set into all of our classes, but if you don't remember to put your word count, that's no big deal. I'm not going to deduct points for that. All right, so tips. Make sure that you cite your source and reference it in that initial post in attempting to use APA format, and I'm going to talk about what that is tonight. Write and complete sentences. Use proper capitalization and punctuation. Do not use texting, language, or slang. This is school. This is formal. It's not informal. And always address each other and myself in a professional manner. Okay, that was a whole bunch of stuff. So before I talk about the other assignments in this course, any questions so far about what I have said? I know it's a bunch to take in, especially if this is your first online experience. So that's why I'm always open for questions later in the week also. But any questions? Okay, so I can't see if anyone's typing. I'm going to go on to the slide, but if you're typing a question, please keep typing, and when it pops up, I'll go back and answer it. But I don't want to just sit here, and then if no one's typing, we'll just continue to sit here. So I'm going to go on, but again, please keep typing your question if you're typing right now. Okay, So the other weekly, you have a written assignment each week. And so these are just in weeks 1, 2, and 4. They're just 300 words in length. They're not major assignments. You just need to bring, again, you need to bring in one source of support. And in all 3 of these, it can be your textbook each week. But week 1, you're going to actually take a learning style assessment, and then you're going to reflect back on the results. Week 2, you're doing a journal assessment. I think you're analyzing dreams, a dream that you've had or a dream that a friend or family member has had if you don't remember your dreams. So dream analysis, applying a little bit of Freud. And then in week 4, you're going to do a disease risk assessment, which again, you're going to go take an assessment about a different area of disease risk, and then you're going to reflect back on it. And so this is, so they're pretty interesting. Hopefully you find them pretty life applicable. So those are the other assignments due in weeks 1, 2, and 4. And then there's a final project due at the end of week 3, and we're going to talk about that separately and what that is. It's actually just a paper. Okay, and then you have weekly live chats every Monday at 7. And in weeks 2 and 4, we're going to use those times to review for the extra, for the exams and that are in those weeks, and attendance is worth extra credit. And if for some reason you can't attend, I always provide an alternative form of extra credit that can be done outside of the chat. So everyone in the class, no matter what's going on in their life, can get the extra credit if they want to. But the easiest way to earn the extra credit is to come to the chat and hang out for about 45 minutes. And while here, we're reviewing for the exam, so it's a study session, so it really works out. And then your final project in this course will be at due Sunday of week 3, and that is June 27th for this term. And then we have 3 tests and exams. We have a midterm exam in week 2. There's a review, I think, in the week 1 area. Let me check, because again, they just updated this course. So I should make sure. I saw it actually in the week 2 area. Let me see if it's been moved. Yes, sorry. I will update the slide too. So the review is in the week 2 area. So you could go right now to week 2 and download or that review. And if you want to like have that review open while you're reading your textbook, you could kind of take notes in the areas where where it says to know this information. Final exam in the week 4 area, there's a review there also. You can go to it ahead of time and access that so you can prepare. And then, like I said, we're going to be reviewing for those in the associated live chats. You also have a post-test in week 4, and that's worth 5% of your grade. It's the same thing as the pre-test that you take this week. Your pre-test does not count towards your grade at all. We don't expect you to come in with any knowledge. Don't forget, though, to take that certification and pre-test. You must do that before I can grade your week 1 work. All right. On to the final paper, applying psychology to your life. So basically you're going to choose, here's a list to give you ideas. These are social changes that you may have experienced. You can also come up with your own, but you need to choose 6 of them. And then, I meant to remove that paragraph. So you're going to choose one of these 6, or you're going to choose 6 from this list, or have, like I said, you can add some of your own. So it's things like, so what aspect of like psychology has impacted? So what you've been learning, the way that you dress, the words you use, where you live, your choice in work, in school. So you're going to look at these areas of your life and kind of apply what you're learning in this course to those actions and decisions. So next you're going to conduct a little little research in the 6 areas of social change or influences you chose. And then in your paper, you're going to, when you write it, make sure you have a section heading for each change. And then each section should be at least 5 to 6 sentences long and include both insights gained from research you did and examples specifically of how they have affected your own life. I'm the only one that's going to read these papers. So you can share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Make sure that you support each one with citations and references from your sources. And there is a final paper example attached to the directions in the week 3 area. Make sure to download that to see how your paper should be formatted. So you should have an introduction paragraph. You should have 6 sections, each section 5 to 6 sentences long about. It can be longer if you want, but at least 5 sections where you talk about each of these, where you're applying psychology to your life. And then a conclusion paragraph. That should be your whole paper, and it should be 800 words in length at least. It can be longer, but it should not be shorter, so that's not too bad in lengthwise. So you should just use APA font, which typically you can use, I think, Calibri now, and then Arial, Times New Roman, nothing larger than 12 point. You want a title page, you want your paper double spaced because that's APA. Most formats want double spaced paper no matter what it is, 800 words. Make sure you use at least 4 sources that are cited and referenced in your paper, and then you have a reference page at the end. And then a requirement for this paper is that there are no direct quotes, so everything must be written completely in your own words. That's called paraphrasing. You want to paraphrase everything in this paper. And again, like I said, an introduction and a conclusion section. And this is how your paper is going to be graded. 60% is the content of your paper. And then 10% of the grade is that you've used APA formatted citations in your paper. 10% is a reference list at the end of your paper. 10% is the formatting of your paper. And 10% is spelling and grammar that's appropriate for the college level. All right, so and I'm going to talk about APA in a minute, and I promise you don't have to learn a whole formatting style, because if you're not going, not every major uses APA as their formatting style. So what I'm looking for is effort, not perfection, but I'm going to give you tools so that you'll understand what APA is and what it looks like and all of that good stuff. But that's your paper. Whew, that was a bunch. Okay, any questions about the weekly assignments, the exams, or your final paper? I promise you, like, you'll get the hang of it, and it's not that overwhelming. And if you need guidance on how to like fit everything into your week and time management, I'm always here to help. Just let me know. Any questions thus far? Anyone else have any questions? Okay, all right. And again, if anyone's typing, keep typing, and I'll jump back at you when the question posts. Okay, plagiarism. This is huge. I see it in almost every class. I often, even when I teach juniors and seniors, I still see plagiarism. So learn early on what plagiarism is and how to avoid it, so you don't get zeros on your papers, because that's not good. So what is plagiarism? How would you define it in your own words? Exactly. The big one is not giving credit and using someone else's words. So there's 3 kinds of plagiarism: copying from another source without using quotation marks, or providing a citation, so word for word. So that's just going onto a website, copying 2 or 3 sentences and pasting them in your paper and just going on. We use SafeAssign. It's similar if you've heard of Turnitin. It's a plagiarism detection software program, and it most likely, if you pull it from the internet, from your textbook, from another student's paper that has been submitted previously, like with Kaiser, so it's in the SafeAssign database, websites. It has a lot of places to check, and it will show up and will tell me, hey, this was taken word from word. Okay, so that is just outright cheating, okay? Because no one copies word for word 3 or 4 sentences or even entire sentence and doesn't know what they're doing. Like, you know you're copying it. So that's just straight out cheating. All right, so sometimes it's almost the same but not quite. And students will change just a few words without using quotations or providing a citation, thinking that they're paraphrasing. But a paraphrase does not keep the original sentence that you read in any way. That's not a paraphrase. So taking the original sentence and putting synonyms in for a handful of words to change a few of the words is still using their sentence, their complete sentence, except with some synonyms. So that is not paraphrasing, and that is still plagiarism. The last one can actually be an accident, because when you paraphrase, you still need to cite and reference the source of that information, because it's still someone else's ideas. You're just writing about it in your own words, but it's not your ideas, it's their information and ideas, just written properly in your own words. So if you do not include citation and reference for that, then that can also be considered plagiarism. I tend to just deduct some points and say, hey, make sure you're putting in your citations for your paraphrased information. And I was working with a student, and so she had, typically, if it's not information that's just general knowledge to the public, it's your instructor's assumption that you read it somewhere. And so there's an expectation you're going to provide that source. Well, I was working with a student who pulled in information that she remembered from a previous class, but she just pulled it from her memory because she had learned it in a previous class. And then also she gave an example of something she had watched, like in a TV show or a video she had seen, but not recently, and she didn't have that information. And then so she was upset that I was like, well, you know, none of this is common knowledge to the average person, so where's your citations? And she told me like where the information came from, and I said, well, then you needed to, in your paper, say, in this previous course, I learned this information, and then write about it, right? Because even though you're not giving a citation per se, at least the person reading it knows where you pulled the information from and understands why maybe you can't give a specific citation or reference because maybe you don't have that textbook anymore. And that's great that she retained knowledge from a previous class and applied it to this class. That's spectacular. So she just needed to do like an intro to show where the information came from. And then the same thing with the video she had seen. Again, she could say, you know, a while back, I had seen this video that shared this information, and then my assumption was, well, if it was a while back, she probably doesn't know where that video is and what it was, so she can't provide that information. But again, it's telling me that she didn't pull this information recently from a source and just choose not to cite it. So if you're going to pull in information that you've learned in a previous class or you heard somewhere, but it fits whatever the discussion or the paper is, you know, make sure if you can't provide a citation for that information, that you preface sharing it with where the information came from. Otherwise, your instructors are going to assume that you read about it recently and want to know where your citation and reference is, and probably deduct points for not including that. So how do you avoid plagiarism? Yes, you want to cite, and cite some more. I think people hear, oh, I need to include at least one citation, and so they cite once. Like, no, you need to cite as many times as you need to cite to cover all the information you've included, right? And so you can pull information from a source in one paragraph. You can pull information from that same source like 2 more paragraphs down, and you need to cite in both paragraphs and whatnot. All right, so you can bring in information from your sources. So this is in general, although direct quotes are fine in your weekly journal or your weekly assignments, just not in your final paper, because that's a specific requirement of that paper, and even also in your weekly discussion. So direct quotes, as long as they're in quotation marks and have the citation right after them, then that's fine. But no more than 10% of any paper or post should be made up of direct quotes, because you're supposed to be writing your papers and posts to demonstrate your understanding of the material and show that you can apply it, and a direct quote never does that. So direct quotes should never be used to make your points. If you use a direct quote, it should only be used to maybe support a point that you've made. And the reason is that if you're good at finding information on the internet or searching journals or whatever, like I'm really good at researching and I'm really horrible at science, especially physics. But if someone asks me a physics question, I'm 100% positive that I can find the answer to that question on the internet or a journal article or whatnot, and I can pull an amazing direct quote to answer that question and give them that direct quote. And that does not mean that I actually understand any of the true details of that direct quote. And so it hasn't been a demonstration of my understanding and learning. It's been a demonstration of my ability to find information, which is not really like why we're in school. So paraphrasing is where you read your source, set it aside, interpret what you've read, and write about your interpretation in your own words, and then still providing that citation at the end of the paraphrase. But if you can read something, think about what you've read, tell me about it in your own words appropriately and apply that information accurately. Now you've shown me that you have at least started understanding the information, you've started learning it, and that you get it, right? So now I can grade you on, okay, they get it, and they're starting to apply it like they're supposed to, and that's what your grade is based on. So paraphrasing is always better. And in fact, if you can paraphrase and never quote or very minimally quote, that is the way you want to go throughout school. All right, is Wikipedia a reputable website to reference in scholarly work? That is correct. You should never cite and reference any wikis, any blogs, like nothing like that. So they're fine in many other situations, just for personal knowledge, just not for academic purposes. All right, so I'm just going to quickly go through how to cite and reference, but then I'm going to remember I'm sending out this PowerPoint tomorrow. And I know your textbook looks a little bit different if you have the newest textbook, the 16th edition, because that's the 15th edition. But I couldn't find a copy of the picture to stick in there. But anyway, so, however, if you had already purchased the 15th edition, that should be fine for this book. That's just one. So the 15th edition is what they've used previously in this course for the past 2 years. And if you have a buddy who took this course and you're borrowing their book and it was free to borrow, by all means, if you have the 15th edition, that's fine. But if you purchase the 16th edition, then perfect. Okay, so citations go in your work directly after the information, whether it's a quote or a paraphrase. And in APA formatting, this is how you would format your in-text citations. It's the author or authors' last names, the date of publication, and if it's a direct quote, it's the page number, or if it's a web page without pages, it would be the paragraph number. With a paraphrase, it's just the name or names and the date, because often you'll read 4 or 5 pages and you might paraphrase 2 or 3 sentences, kind of like summing up the key points, and so it would be really messy to have to try to figure out all those pages. So no pages required when you cite a paraphrase. So this is how you might put it into your work, how you would include it. So your citations, if it's a paraphrase, you can include the author's last name as part of your sentence. That's not done as commonly because you're not specifically saying they said this. It's you like summarizing key points. But you can say, like Brown, you can state it, describes, and then paraphrase what they described. And the date would go in parentheses right after you state the author's names. So right here. So it's more common that after you paraphrase that you would include the information. I can't draw in a straight line with a mouse, but that you would include the citation after the end of the last sentence of your paraphrase. So your paraphrase can be 1 sentence long, it might be 4 sentences long. Your citation would go at the end of the last sentence of that paraphrase, and it tells the person reading your paper, I am done paraphrasing from the source, because you've given the citation. So it does not have to be at the end of every sentence. If there are 3 or 4 sentences in a single block, in a single paraphrase, then you can just put it at the end of that last sentence. That does not mean listing all of your references at the end of each paragraph. It's not likely that you've paraphrased entire paragraphs after paragraph after paragraph. Although I think some students just think, I'll just stick it at the end of every paragraph. But that doesn't tell me when your paraphrase ended, which information from in that paragraph is paraphrased. So it goes at the end. Now, if you're citing a direct quote, it's much more common that you do say the author's name, because sometimes you're saying Brown states and then you're actually telling us what Brown said. So again, it would be the author's name at the beginning of the sentence, all the, you know, if there's more than one author, and then the date right after in parentheses, and then the page or paragraph number goes at the end of the quote. Or if you don't use the author's name in the actual sentence, which is perfectly fine, then it all goes at the end of the direct quote. Wow, I am horrible with straight lines today. Anyway, so that's how you would include your citations into your work. All right, so reference goes at the end. So your citation is really just an abbreviation of your reference, and it goes in your paper. It's short and to the point, just so I know when I go to your reference section which of your sources you are referring to. And then the full address of where to find the information goes at the end in your reference section. So this is how your textbook would be referenced. And then this is just some common formatting. You'll notice all of these, the second line is indented. It's called a hanging indent. So in APA format, give it a go. Again, I'm looking for effort and not perfection. This might be the first time that one of you has used APA. You may not use it again, depending on what your major is. But I'm just looking that you're looking at the examples and making your best effort to properly format these. I'm not going to take off points if I can see there was effort. Now, in no aspect of any formatting style is just listing a bunch of URLs of websites formatting. So that's where points are going to be lost, because there was no attempt at all to format it. And like I said, no matter which formatting style you use when you go on to other classes, like it will never just be okay to list a bunch of URLs. So that's kind of where points might get taken off, but as long as you're making an effort, then that's fine. That's all I'm looking for. Okay. Whew. So that's the end of our section on formatting and APA and plagiarism and how to avoid it. So any questions before I do a brief introduction to psychology? All right. Okay. On to psychology. So what is psychology? How would you define it? Very good. Yes, we definitely look at how the mind works. That's a big part of psychology. But we look at both mind and behavior. So mental processes and behaviors, because they influence each other. They're often directly related, and so they both go together. So it's not just the mind, it's mind and behavior. So behaviors are overt. They can be directly observed, like crying. Mental processes are covert. They cannot be directly observed, such as remembering, but we look at both of them. We also look at lifespan, or part of psychology is also development throughout one's lifespan. So the goals of psychology that are kind of outlined in the book, I think they are outlined early on, but there's 4 goals of psychology. So in psychology, we want to describe behaviors. We want to name and classify observable, measurable behaviors. Then we want to understand why behaviors happen. And I know that it talks about just behaviors, but we also want to understand mental processes. Like we want to understand like emotions, and those aren't necessarily observable, but we just really want to understand why people do what they do and think what they think when you get down to it. So we want to be able to describe it. We want to be able to understand causes. We want to be able to accurately predict based if, we know what certain behaviors trigger certain emotions. I mean, that's something that's important to predict, especially if you're, if you're a therapist and that's how you're applying psychology and whatnot. So we want to be able to predict things accurately. And then a control, although not negatively. We don't want to use psychology to control, say, people's behaviors without them knowing, but we do want to help people to change behaviors, change attitudes, or if they have healthy behaviors, we want to help them to grow those. If people are really good at managing stress, we want to be able to know why. Why are some people really good at being in really stressful situations and not having emotional struggles? And so we want to be able to help them continue to be strong, and we want to help other people to learn those skills or to learn how to perceive things differently so that they can become more hardy and robust. All right, so there are a number of perspectives in modern psychology, and it's not that one perspective is right and the rest are wrong, but each perspective, it's like a jigsaw puzzle of understanding people and animals. So each perspective looks at either a different aspect of psychology or a different aspect of humans' behaviors and cognitive behaviors also, or it looks at it, they might look at it in a couple of different ways, but really to get the entire picture of why we do what we do and why we think what we think, you really have to consider all of these perspectives because they, like I said, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So these are all individual pieces. When you put them together, then we get like a full understanding. So in this course, you're going to touch on and learn about each of these perspectives and how they're applied and when they're applied and whatnot. So there's the biological perspective, and this is actually pretty new perspective within the world or the realm or of psychology. I mean, really probably the last decade or two, because prior to that, the only way that you could say study a person's brain or nervous system was like in an autopsy after they were dead. And so it didn't give us a ton of insights, a little bit, but now because of things like MRIs and CAT scans and PET scans and all sorts of technological advances, we can actually see what's going on in the person's mind, their nervous system, what's going on in their body, the interaction between these while they're alive by exposing them to different things while they're undergoing these different types of technology. So now we can actually gain, we have a lot more insight and a lot more understanding because of this perspective now because of technology. Sometimes it's called biopsychology or neuropsychology or physiological psychology. So we've got behavioral perspective. This focuses on how behaviors are learned and reinforced. It only studies behaviors that can be observed, and the theorist that like influenced this the most was B.F. Skinner, but this helps us to understand a big part of like conditioning and learning, and that's a very important aspect of psychology because we're all impacted by learning processes. Some we're aware of and others we are not aware of. Then there's the cognitive perspective, and it is what it is. So it focuses on mental processes such as memory, thinking, problem solving, language, and decision making. This has been influenced over the years by Jean Piaget and Albert Bandura. You'll see these names as you read through your textbook. But contemporary applied psychology says, you know what, we really need to bring together the behavioral and the cognitive because very seldom does one impact us and it's not influenced by the other, or vice versa, right? So we really, if we're going to help people in an applied way through therapy, through education, we have to really understand both the cognitive and the behavioral and how they're intertwined. So a more common perspective in the area of applied or used psychology is cognitive behavioral perspective, and it is what it says it is. It's a combination of the two of these. And this is the most common perspective that is the foundation for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment today. Then we have the humanistic perspective, and this emphasizes the role of motivation on thought and behavior, talks a lot about self-actualization, and that's their central concept. And it's been influenced by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you took psychology in high school or you've taken any other psychology class or a development class, you've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you're going to read about that also. Then there's the psychodynamic perspective. This was all Sigmund Freud, and most people have heard of Freud. He's probably one of the most interesting characters to read about. His theories, although not all of them have withstood the test of time, and but they're still fascinating. Although things like the unconscious and defense mechanisms we still apply all the time. So some of his stuff has stuck around, but it emphasizes the roles of the unconscious mind, early childhood experiences, and interpersonal relationships. And then last but not least is the multicultural perspective, which again is a rather new perspective. Probably not much, there wasn't much study put into this in, like, say, the 60s and 70s, but over the past few decades, I think we've just recognized that, hey, we are a multicultural country, and culture influences our development. It influences our perception, it influences the way we've been socialized, it influences what we see as, say, gender roles, you know, the way marriages work, or the idea of marriage and how it works. And that, I mean, culture definitely has an impact in so many areas of our life. So if we're going to understand why people do what they do and why people think what they think, then we have to understand how they've been influenced by the culture they were raised in. And so this focus is on that. How are we impacted by our culture? And also, how do people from different cultures interact with each other? And that is the different perspectives of psychology in a nutshell. I know that was like a bunch of information in a really short period of time, but the great thing is you're gonna, like, delve into each of these areas and come to better understand them as you work through the class and read through your textbook. All right, so that is it for tonight's live chat. Do you have any questions at all before we go? Next week, we'll be reviewing for the midterm exam. So remember, attendance is worth extra credit. And I think that covers it. Also, I'm really big on communication. I know life happens. I did 2 of my degrees as an online student. I had a child and a family. I worked. Like, I know that life can happen. So if something pops up and you need an extension, you need an extra day on an assignment, just communicate with me. I'm pretty flexible and I'll work with you. But don't, like, not submit work for 2 weeks and all of a sudden be like, oh, life was crazy, and come back to me after like 2 weeks of not doing anything in the class. I can't work with you then, right? And so, but if you contact me by, like, the due date of an assignment, say, hey, I need 2 more days, like, I'm super flexible. I'm gonna give you those 2 extra days. Nope, there is the learning style assessment. So there's the discussion. There's no exam this week. There's that pretest, which is just 20 multiple choice questions. So it won't take you very long to do. The grade doesn't count. So you're going to do your pretest. But there's the discussion this week, and then there's the learning style assessment. So you're going to go to that in the week 1 area, take the learning style assessment, and then reflect back on the results. And today's class does not count as extra credit. So I'm only allowed to give so much extra credit. So I keep those for the 2 exam reviews. So weeks 2 and 4 are the 2 chats that are worth extra credit. So if you haven't already, go to the week 1 area and start scrolling down through everything. It's going to be some supplemental resources, all your assignments. The tests online are multiple choice, and I think they've just started using a Respondus lockdown browser. So basically, before you take the test, it's going to be, like, videoed. So you're going to, like, show your ID to show it's you. And it's just to make sure that no one's, like, taking their test with other people or cheating while they take their test. So basically, it's just, it's a way to help make sure students aren't cheating while they take their exams. But it's just multiple choice. It's 50 multiple choice questions for the midterm and 50 multiple choice questions for the final exam. And like I said, you'll find the reviews in weeks 2 for the midterm and week 4 for the final. So you can go ahead and download those now. Yes, they are monitored. It's something, if you've taken online classes with Kaiser before, your exams probably were not monitored, but it's something that they have started using. Any other questions about the class? Well, no, okay. So it's being video, but no one's actively watching you. But if there's any weird, I think the way it works, I know I can go back and scan through the video if I need to, if I suspect anything. And then if there's any like actions, I might be thinking about a different software program. I know there's one out there that if like you start like typing multiple sentences, if you pick up your phone and start talking, it like will snap some pictures, but this might just record the video. And then if I suspect something, like if someone got 100 on the test and they only took 5 minutes to take the test or 10 minutes to take the test, 50 multiple choice questions, I'm probably going to go back and look, right? Because something's up. No one should be able to take a 50 question test in 10 minutes and get a perfect score, right? But if, so we have the ability, but like no one is sitting like while you're taking it and actually watching you. It just records a file that can be looked at if there's suspicious outcome of the test. So. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're not, you know, it's just, it's a program you're going to like use on your computer that you started. Hunter, I'm fine with if you use notes, so I'm okay with that. I know, I'm pretty sure that you don't need to, because my daughter who just graduated from University of South Florida, she's used that, and I'm pretty sure she did not have to like be at a certain time. Nope. So you'll still have 4 days once the exam opens to take it whenever it fits your schedule. But Hunter, in other classes, make sure that you ask your instructors if they're okay if you use notes. But I'm okay. And I'm sorry about my puppy, but she just heard my cats. So I was trying to keep her quiet throughout the chat. She almost made it. I think the lockdown browser also makes it so you can't open another website and like, you know, look through Quizlets because sometimes exam questions are on Quizlets out there. So I think that's another thing it does. I think it prevents you while you're taking the test from opening like multiple web pages so that you can't go see if you can look up answers. Any other questions? All right, for anyone who doesn't have any questions, we are done tonight and you're free to go. But if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to stay and answer them. But for those getting ready to sign off, have a wonderful evening. Have a great week 1. Great, Nico. I'm so looking forward to working with you and everyone in the course. I think it's going to be a great one. Well, the next class is an exam review. So here's the thing. If I have 7 or 8 students in the class, which for the exam reviews usually we do, is very difficult because everyone's trying to like speak at the same time. For the exam review, I do multiple choice questions. So you just have to like type a letter in. So it makes it easier. Oh, you know what? I just took a look. You know, I think they might only just be using the lockdown browser. So I think you guys actually aren't going to be recorded. I think they're just using the browser, the lockdown, so you can't open other websites. So actually, I could have been wrong. So, yep, I was wrong. You will not be videoed. You will not be recorded while you're taking it. The thing that they have started using is just the lockdown browser. So once you start the exam, you cannot open other browsers on your computer, but they're not going to be recording you. So I was wrong about that. They're just using the lockdown browser on the exams. Any other questions? Well, if not, you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. Have a great week 1. And I look forward to seeing you in the discussion boards.